welcome everybody. I'm Arthur Perez. This is the Ask My Roofer podcast. I have an amazing guest with me today, but first, let's introduce our sponsors. We'd like to thank Dataforma. Dataforma is the premier provider of project management, service management, and CRM software. Guys, stop wasting time on multiple platforms, multiple services. Dataforma has you covered on any device, anywhere. It's dataforma.com. And also Roof Source. Can't say enough about Roof Source. They are providing premier materials. They are a fantastic company to work with because not only do they provide specification, they're on job sites, they're educating you, they're teaching you on how to use the products that they rep. Check them out at roofsource.com. And today we're joined with Becca Switzer of Roof Sales Mastery. Good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Arthur. How are you?
I'm excellent. So we had a opportunity to chat briefly before we got the podcast started, and congratulations on your new place. It's beautiful. I'm jealous, and it seems like you're going to have a lot of fun up there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm stoked about it. There's a lot of space, a lot of plowing that needs to take place in the winter. Lots of room for me to collect way too many animals, which, by the way, dear audience, there's 2 sleeping dogs behind me. If any sound goes off, there's going to be barking, so sorry in advance.
That's awesome. So let's talk about your background. How did you get into roofing? And this is always the best because nobody just decides they want to get into roofing. So what's your origin story?
So I actually, after I graduated high school, I went to the University of Iowa for 2 years. And the only thing that I knew that I liked to do was write and entertain. And I liked animals, but I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to vet school. So I was going to college for a couple years, not really with any specific direction. And after my sophomore year, I went back to my hometown just to work over the summer because I used to work at Taco John's when I was in high school, which is basically like Taco Bell, but a little bit better. And so I went back to work for the summer, but when I got back to my house, there was a recruiting letter from Cutco Cutlery or Vector Marketing. And I remember 2 of my friends were in the kitchen with me, and I opened up this letter, and one of my friends is like, I don't know. So they're hiring for the sales position. And one of my friends is like, I'm pretty sure my brother went to one of those interviews one time when he was in college, and it sounds like a scam where you like sell pots and pans. It's like an MLM thing, like to your neighbors and family. And my other friend's like, yeah, that sounds like a scam. Don't do it. And I'm like, I think I'm gonna go check it out. So I went and long story short there, I went and I started selling Cutco knives for the summer after my sophomore year of college, and I did really, really well at it. And I'm like, I'm good at selling shit. So I dropped out of college. I kept selling Cutco. I ended up moving down to Kansas City with, my ex-husband now, but he was actually my Cutco manager. Later down that line, one of the guys that used to be a Cutco manager was at the time now the vice president of like the second largest storm restoration company in the nation. And this guy was, unbeknownst to us, he was going to be starting his own company, but he was like poaching Cutco managers and Cutco salespeople because Cutco has like truly one of the best sales training platforms in the direct sales game. Like it's amazing. And so he's like headhunting these people and recruiting them. And so I remember my ex-husband came home one day and he's like, do you think you could sell roofs? And I'm like, huh? he's like, yeah, like, our buddy's been talking to me about like, this is how it works. And like, hey, basically what they do is they chase hailstorms and they're going to be setting up the storm out in Connecticut. And then there was going to be Pennsylvania after that. And he's like, I think we could do it. And we were kind of at a point where he had been doing Cutco for 6 years. He was kind of burnt out. I was game to do whatever. I just knew that if I sold a bigger ticket item, I'd make more money. So I'm like, are they going to show me what to do? Like, yeah, I'll do it. So we pack up all our stuff. We sell most of our stuff, pack up what fits in like a couple Rubbermaids in a truck, move out to Connecticut. And of course, we're tossed to the wolves just like everyone else. It's like this old storm. We went out there and there's like no fresh stuff. Everything had been picked over. We were actually sent on like the errands of, hey, this salesman quit and like stole a bunch of insurance checks. Can you go clean up these jobs type of stuff? And I'm like, what am I doing out here? And then very shortly after that, we went to a different storm in Pennsylvania. But I was like, I think 4 months late to the storm when we got out there. So it was just an interesting start, but long story short there as well, we didn't have a backup plan. So I'm like, I have to figure this out. Dove in, started figuring out how to do it. In my first 4 months really on the job, I ended up selling like 650 and took home 105. And that was with, I knew nothing. And I had to run my whole, like all my jobs cradle to grave and all that. So I was like, I think I'm pretty good at this. And then so on and so forth. I kept doing it for a few years and then realized like this industry is starving for training. So that's how I got into roof sales mastery.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. There is absolutely no training. They will give you a stale book of business or an old storm to go chase, and they kick you out the door and they say, good luck. You
Yeah.
know, and that's something that because I interview a lot of people in the industry, contractors, manufacturers, distributors, everybody says the same thing. There is no training. You learn on the job or you don't learn at all, and it's very fail oriented, right? We're all failing and learning and trying not to make catastrophic mistakes in order to get better at what we're trying to do.
Which is a huge problem for two reasons. One, if you're a business owner and this is how you're bringing your new guys on, you're going to have the worst time building a sales team. And I get it. Like, I consider myself one of those like freaks of nature that just I can pick stuff up like that. The average person can't. And that doesn't mean that they can't be a great salesperson, but when you like they don't know anything about roofs, they've maybe never done sales before, they're never done door to door, they're not prepared for the objections, they don't know how insurance works, they don't know what storm damage looks like, and you fling them into a neighborhood with Jeremy and you're like, hey, Jeremy's going to knock doors, listen to him. And then Jeremy's like doing all things wrong, but it works for him for some reason. He's like selling at the door and he's kind of high pressure, and then this numbnuts is behind him like, I'm supposed to do what? Like, what does he even say? It doesn't work. And it's a shame for salespeople because salespeople, when they come on to do this job, they're already taking a great risk. Like, the average person's coming from a shitty 9 to 5 where they're making 15 bucks an hour, right? And it's like, if you get somebody that says, okay, I'm willing to try this door knocking thing, you had to better support them as much as you possibly can, because you already have that right there is a diamond in the rough. Most people, they hear door to door or direct sales or commission and they run for the hills. So I really challenge business owners to invest first and foremost in sales training for their guys, because it's critical for your success as a business owner if you want to have a long lasting team with not a ridiculous turnover rate, and for the sales guys so they actually have a chance at survival.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, the only worst situation you could put that new sales guy in is if you were to blindfold him before you did everything that you just mentioned, right? I mean,
Send them into a non-English speaking community and be like, okay, bud, I'll pick you up at lunch, knock 100 doors, you'll be all right. It's a numbers game.
it's it is so sad, but so necessary for something like roof sales mastery. So, when did you decide that I'm going to branch off and there is no training? This is an absolute necessity.
So the first winter, so our plan when my ex and I got into roof sales was we were going to work until November 1st. Hopefully by that time we would have made decent money. And then we were going to take like 4 or 5 months off to go snowboarding. Like, that was kind of the goal. That was like the carrot we were dangling in front of ourselves. So I worked for 4 months. I made 105 grand, and we were like, holy shit, in 4 months, that's pretty cool. And over the winter, my ex was like, you got really good at this and you don't even know like what you're doing yet. Like, what would it look like if you actually had legitimate training? And so he got online. And this was back in like 2010 or something like that. So he starts Googling like roof sales training seminar, roof sales training, anything, books, anything. Nothing showed up. Like, literally, there was no resources. And we're like, how can this be? And finally, he came across, I think on like Roofer's Coffee Shop or something, he came across this ad for like this tiny little seminar, which was really like 20 people or 22 people, something like that, down in Frisco, Texas. And we're like, okay, tickets were, I don't know, $1,000 or something like that. And it was a 2-day seminar over the weekend. And we're like, well, why don't we go to this? Because anything that we can learn to even get 10% better would be a ton of money in our pocket. So we go down there, and I was like dumbfounded at how bad it was. Like, and no, I'm not trying to like shit on anybody who's out there trying to put value out in the marketplace. And at the time, that was the only thing that was out there. But I mean, we were sitting in there just like, this is all very rudimentary information. Like, these guys don't know, but everybody else in the room was eating it up. Like, everyone else was like, uh-huh, uh-huh. And I was like, this is bad. And so, during conferences, stuff like that, and especially in a small group, you have a chance to kind of raise your hand. You say, hey, when I run into this situation, this is what's worked for me, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the 2-day conference, like, the other attendees were not running up to the guy that was running the thing to ask questions. They were coming up to me and they're like, "Hey, can you tell me that pitch again?" Or like, "Can you say what you said?" Blah, blah. And so afterward, I remember we got in the car and we were leaving, and my ex was like, "You could do that, and you could probably do it 100 times better, and you could probably charge 5 times as much. Like, why don't you do it?" And I'm like, okay. So I went back home and I started, like, I just got on my computer and I just started writing everything that I knew: door pitches, objection handling, what I say, how I do adjust for meetings, finding damage, like all that, my closing presentation, my sales pitch, all of it. And I ended up writing my ebook, Diamonds in the Sky, which is the introduction to storm restoration sales. And then from there, I started running a webinar to teach my supplement stuff. Because at the time, I had gotten really, really good at supplementing, and I was doing stuff that like nobody else was doing, using line items from Xactimate no one even knew they could put on there, getting adjusters to say yes to things that no one was getting. Like, I was doubling my claims a lot of the time. So I put that together and I built an online course for teaching the supplementing stuff. And then that spiraled into business owners like eating that up and coming to me and saying, "How do I recruit and train my sales guys?" So then I built all my 6 courses, and I've got the ebook and all that stuff. So that's what happened.
So that's the long story short.
Right. Long story long. That's how it happened. So yeah, it was cool. I wrote the ebook. That kind of just happened organically because I sat down with just Word documents and I'm like, door knocking. Here's everything I say. Here's what I don't do. Here's what I always do. Here are mistakes I see people make. And then I kept doing pieces and pieces, and I'm like, well, that's a book. So I put it together, and then from there just kind of expanded. And my online courses have like hundreds of lessons. There's like videos and word for word scripts and stuff like that. And it's all my best stuff. If you could just open up my brain and get in there and be like, what does she do? I've poured it all in
It's phenomenal too. And like I'd mentioned before we started, I thought I was going to be really clever and just learn everything that you know before we hopped onto this. And then I found thousands of videos and content, and maybe I'm exaggerating, but not by much when I say there are tons of videos that you put out just with little gems and diamonds in the sky, right? Talking,
there. Free stuff.
and that's the free. Well, and then so I go onto your website and I'm researching this and that. I'm like, I wouldn't even know where to start. It would benefit me to like reach out to you or your team to find a starting point to fine tune what I was really working on, because you have so much content. There's so much that you've put together. It's out of this world. And so I'd love to transition into new year, new goals, coming out of this holiday slump, right? So when we talk about goals, I think it all starts with motivation. I think you've alluded to that several times. What is the secret to motivation?
I love this question because everyone's always like, how do you stay motivated? How do you find motivation? Like, that's my favorite one. And here's the thing. For me, what I believe is motivation is not like a real thing. It's a choice. Like, if you wait around and you wait to get that feeling, like feeling motivated is just like an emotion, right? It's a feeling. Feelings come and go. You can't just conjure them up out of the blue, right? So if you're sitting around waiting to feel motivated, you might as well just quit and sit in your house in your recliner for the rest of your life and do nothing, because very rarely do I wake up and I'm like, I can't wait to go do 200-pound deadlifts right now. Right? I don't, but I choose to do it. So I always say action creates the emotion. People are always waiting for the emotion to take action. Like, I feel like doing it now. You have to understand that if you define your commitments, whether that's with exercise or your activities with door knocking or whatever it is, making the phone, picking up the phone, answering the emails, doing whatever it is, you commit to the action, and then the emotion follows. And I always use exercise as an example because I'm huge on like physical fitness, and I think that that's the first thing that if you can tackle your body, you can tackle anything else, because it's really a mental challenge. But think about exercise. Every single one of us has been like, I don't want to go work out right now. But then we force ourselves to do it. And then halfway through, we're like, I'm so glad I did this. And you feel great afterward, right? But if you're sitting there with crumbs all over your shirt, watching Netflix, and you're like, I don't feel like working out, I'm just going to wait until I feel like it, you're never going to leave. You're going to die in that couch, right? So being motivated is really not something anybody should focus on. What we all need to focus on is, what are we deciding to do? What are we committing to do? And then you make just decisions based around that action commitment.
And so you talk about feeling based activity versus commitment based activity. Can you talk about the difference between the two?
So the difference is kind of what I just said, which is really just you've got activities that you do when you feel like it, and that's great, but call that gravy. Then there's commitment based activity, which is you're going to do it no matter what because it's been defined, it's tangible, it's quantifiable, right? So if you say I commit to knocking 40 doors a day, 4 days a week, then you don't wait to feel like it, whether you feel like it or not. Those are the actions you've committed to. And if you do that with every area of your life, and again, I know exercise is just such an easy one, but you say, I'm going to work out for 30 minutes a day, 4 days a week. I'm going to knock 40 days, 40 doors a day, 4 days a week. I'm going to do all these things. Then it just becomes execution as opposed to living up here. Do I want to do it? Do I feel like doing it? The weather's bad, blah, blah. It's just, here are the numbers I have to do them, cross them off. And you do that constantly, then it becomes habit and you're never living in this feeling based world for productivity. You're just executing at all times.
So how does one go about setting goals? Are there metrics for it? I mean, when you're talking to new salesmen and they're saying, "Hey, I'm new to the industry. What am I shooting for? What do I aim for? How do I even execute what I'm trying to accomplish?" What do you say to them?
Well, I always say, first of all, how much money do you want to make? And every time I ask a new salesperson that, they always shoot really low. You know,
Really?
yeah, because well, most of the time, because they're just like they're used to. I shouldn't say always. That's not true. Some people, of course, are like, yeah, I want to make $200,000 this year. But I feel like a lot of people, when they get started, they have hesitancy to set this crazy goal because they don't want to let themselves down, or they don't think it's realistic yet, or they don't see the pieces that are gonna right. Like when you're brand new and you still don't even know how to knock a door and get someone to say yes to you, you don't see how all these pieces are going to connect to where you have six figures in your pocket at the end of the year. So the first thing I would say is, how much do you want to make? And like, I can actually think of a very specific training call I had with a new salesperson. So I'm just going to use this as an example. They're like, I don't know, like 50K. And I'm like, that's what you want to make, or that's what you have to make to survive? And they're like, well, my bills would be paid, right now if I made 50,000. I'm like, okay. So I rate that down, and that's like the must number. Like if you do not make that amount, you should quit and do something else. Like you're not meant for this job, right? Like you suck. So I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, but that's like your survival number. How much would you want to make to be like really happy? And then they're like, okay, I don't know, maybe like 100. And I'm like, okay, that's a good number, totally doable, 100K. And I'm like, and what's a goal that scares you to even say out loud, but if if everything went right, you busted your ass, you could hit this number? And they're like, oh, I don't know, 150. And I'm like, all right. So I write down 150. And what I call that is a three-part goal setting strategy, which is must, should, could. So must, again, is like, if you do not hit this number, you've completely dropped the ball. You should be ashamed of yourself, type of a thing, right? Like you have to hit that number. Should is like, if I really apply myself and I work like normal and I study and I do what I'm supposed to do, there's no reason I shouldn't hit this number. That's like the more fun number where you're going to have a lot more money in your pocket. The could is like your greed number. Like if I hit this number, I'm going to go to Greece for 2 weeks and I'm going to buy that 3 carat diamond ring for my soon to be fiance. I'm going to do the crazy stuff. So when you set it like that, that allows you to not set the bar too low so that you're going to shoot too low. But also it allows people to set that kind of bigger, scary number and at least have it as a target in general so that it's out there, it's floating around. And that's how you actually decide what your action commitments are going to be based on those figures. Because now okay, let's just use 100 because it's easy. If you know that you make $1,000 commission and you want to make $100,000 this year, you need 100 deals. Okay, easy enough. What does it take for you to get 100 deals? Well, let's just say, and I'm going to use again just easy numbers here. If your closing ratio is 50%, you need to sit in front of about 200 people to get 100 deals, right? And we're probably going to say 250 because you never know, some fall through the cracks and stuff like that. But you need to sit in front of 250 people to keep 100 deals at the end of the year. All right, how do you sit in front of 250 people? Well, you probably need to set up 300 inspections because, again, let's say there's some no shows, some no damages, whatever. So, how do you get 300 inspections lined up? All right, well, if it takes you 15 doors to line up each one, take 15 times 300, which I don't know what number that is, 4,500? Is that what it is? I'm not good at math. Everyone knows this. I make mistakes all the time. But now you know that's how many doors. And then you go, all right, so divide that by how many weeks you want to work. Let's say 48 weeks if you want to take a month off, or 50 weeks if you're going to take 2 weeks off. And now you know exactly how many doors per week. And then you can break that down into days. So actually, I'll make this really easy because I want to show people how simple it really can be. So we said what, 300 appointments times 15 doors, right?
You're
So
right.
it's
It's
4,500. Guys, I
yep.
got
Yep.
it. Okay. And we're going to divide that by, let's just say 48 weeks. So that's 94 doors per week. So you can split that up and do 50 doors if you want, or 48 doors twice a week. That's only like an hour to an hour and a half of knocking twice a week, right? That's nothing. And if you do that every single week, you're inevitably going to hit that goal. Now, one thing I will say, Arthur, and I know I'm going off on a big tangent here, but you have to be very specific and accurate and honest about what your actual statistics are. What are your stats at the door? Because some people are like, I close 90%. And I'm like, really? And it's really like 45%, but they think it's that good, right? So you have to know what your stats are. How do you do that? Track it. How many doors did I knock today? How many did I line up? How many did I keep? Out of those, how many did I sign? Keep track of all of that. And then you have numbers, and now it's science, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
that's what I say when it comes to goal setting and execution.
Well, and it's super helpful. Like you said, you have to know your own metrics. You have to know your closing ratios. You have to have a barometer. What are you trying to accomplish? If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, it's like getting in a car and not knowing where you're going. You're never going to get there, you know. I have a question for you. Is it possible to remove emotions from selling? Because I know that sales is so competitive. And for me, as I've been selling, it is such a competitive thing. You know, you talk about it not being for everybody. I am so passionate about sales. I have a hard time sometimes removing that emotion from it. So how does someone deviate from that, or is it possible in your head?
So when I think about emotions being involved in sales, here's where emotions don't serve people well. They get, and I have a video out there on YouTube called Desperation is a Stinky Perfume. I highly recommend everybody watches it. It'll be a big aha moment for you. But emotion, when you get your hopes up, like when you go to this door, and each door you're like, I really hope, you can't take it if they say no, or you're like, my paycheck, like I need to make money, and you're getting all this emotion backed into it. Now you knock on the door, someone opens the door. First of all, your desperation is like stinking up the place. They can tell, right? Yeah, it's like, wow, this guy's like desperate. So your results are going to suffer from that. And you're going to have a terrible time because every single no that you get, and guess what? In sales, we get a shitload of no's. In fact, the people who sell the most probably hear the most no's, but we're the ones that do so much work that we get to more yeses than everybody else because we're willing to go through more no's than everybody else, right? So when it comes to your emotions, it's you do on a at some point have to kind of just eliminate that. And you are going through the motions, for lack of better terms. You just have to hit the doors. And I think that this confidence and security kind of comes from knowing that you're good at your craft now and not worrying like, did I say the right thing? Did I do not? When I go out and I sell or I do a sales call nowadays, I'm not thinking that. I know what value I bring. And because of that, I know there's going to be some people who are a good fit. There's going to be some people who aren't. I'm never getting on the phone and being like, oh, it's like, I really hope that and if they don't buy something, I don't get off and I'm like, fuck, like that's just not part of my reality. So you do, to a degree, have to take it out. Now, where emotion plays a great role is when it's not getting you caught up in the need or like this desperation thing because you need to make the paycheck. And instead, you're being empathetic during your sales closing process. So now you can pick up like, this is all psychology, right? Like where
Right.
this person, what triggers them, how they feel, what their fear might be, what their hesitancy might be coming from, where you can connect with them on that way. I would say salespeople are usually very empathetic in that way, because they know how to read people's faces, how their posture, what they're saying. They can read behind between the lines when somebody gives you an objection. What does that objection really mean? What's the actual objection behind this objection they're feeding me? So that's where it plays a positive role. But you have to be able to just go out there and just do the work, like do the activities without getting so attached to the outcome and letting your emotions get the best of you. Otherwise, you're just going to get eaten up and spit out.
Well, and I think that's the hardest thing to do is separate the no's from the momentum, right? Because like you said, the most successful salespeople, they're probably hearing the most no's. I remember early on in my career, some 12 years ago, uh, I would get off of a call or I would, after I had met with a client, and I would literally eat myself up about something that I said, which probably didn't even register to them. But because I was so desperate early on to make money and get every sale, I would just go over everything that I said wrong, and I would kick myself, you know. And that's a tough place to be. But as you hone your craft, as you develop your skills, as you just, develop your education in the game, you get more confident in that, and those things become a non-issue, you know. Um I'm gonna have to watch that video though. I still am pretty emotional when it comes to sales and things like that, but I think that's just part of the passion. I think that salespeople are a different breed in general. I think that we can take a little bit more abuse than most people. I think, if not intentionally, we become calloused over time. So, it. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say something that you said a second ago, where you said, I would sit there after I did some had a sales presentation, and maybe it didn't go exactly the way that you wanted it to, or they said something and you responded, and it wasn't a productive thing to say, or you're like, I should have said this, like I should have handled this objection this way, I should have said that. There's a benefit, because I'm like a crazy person like that too, in certain ways, where I'm like, I shouldn't have done that. But you have to be able to just, instead of sit there and really get down on yourself and beat yourself up about it, have that tiny moment where you go, damn it, I should have done this. And then go, okay, on the next one, now I know on the next one, when I hear something like that, here's how I'm gonna respond. So you have to just be able to, like, let things go a lot and really fast. And I think that's the problem with a lot of salespeople, especially again, when they're new, they're desperate to make that commission. And they're like so afraid they're not going to figure it out. So every little mistake is like this giant punch to the gut that they can't get up off the ground from. You have to just be a badass about it and be like, okay, on to the next one. Like every single opportunity is a learning experience. I just had a salesperson, I did a little coaching call the other day, and he came back and he's like, it was like his first or second day knocking doors, right? And he's like, yeah, there was this other lady and she was really nice, and but she was about to get solar panels on her roof in like 2 weeks, and so there just wasn't any point. And I go, she's about to get solar panels on her roof, and I'm like, that was the perfect in. I'm like, that's where you go, Mr. Jones. I'm really glad I caught you today. There's been a lot of people getting solar panels put on their roof. And if you've got any storm damage up there at all, once those panels are up, you're not trying to take those off and dismantle them. So you really only have like another couple days here to just double check. And you might not have damage anyway, but if there's anything that's up there at all that would require a repair or a roof replacement that insurance covers, by the way, it's best to know now before you get those solar panels installed. So does this time or this time work better for me to just pop up and take a quick look for you and let you know you're in the clear? And he was like, why didn't I think of that? And like beat himself up about it. I'm like, because you're new. You don't know how, right? You don't know anything yet. Like, don't beat yourself up about it. But now you know. That's something that's actually a huge in. That's not even really an objection, right? So you just have to be able to be like, be a good student, be flexible, and understand you're going to get the shit kicked out of you for a little while. Like when I learned to snowboard, I remember I went with a group. So I've been snowboarding like in Iowa, in these little hills, and like I was okay. I'd never gone to a real mountain in the Rocky Mountains, right? And I went with a group of my high school like dude friends, and they had all been snowboarding for like a decade. And I'm like 16 or 17. And we go up to Steamboat, and how they taught me was like, see you at the bottom, and all took off. And I'm like, okay. And so I just had to ride, and I busted my ass so many times. Like I was littering profanity all over the county. Like I was in so much pain, and I kept hurting myself and kept hurting myself and kept hurting myself. But I was like, I there's no alternative. I want to be able to do this. So I just kept doing it. And eventually you catch on and you go, oh, when I do that, I fall and I bust my tailbone. I'm not going to do that again. Oh, when I do this, I fall and I almost snap my wrist. I'm not going to do that again. When I do this, I have to do, right? So you just learn and you keep doing it. What if when we were kids or babies and we started to try to walk, do you know how many times an infant falls down when they're learning to try to walk? I, get- I can't remember the stat, but it's like thousands of times. But they don't give up because they're just like, I want to learn how to do this. You have to be the same with the sales job.
Yeah, that's why babies are made out of rubber. Rubber, they could just bounce off the floor and get right back up and keep going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, be like a rubber baby when you're out there. It's the only way.
It really is the only way. Committing failure to memory and learning, that's huge. You bring up the solar situation, and it's like for him, had he known that, that the solar panel is going to be warranted for X amount of years, you're not going to want to tear that off to replace the roof in 2 years, you know. So that's huge. So let's talk about building momentum for the rest of the year, because I, again, stalked your YouTube channel. You have all these fantastic videos about coming out of the holidays, which is where we're at now, and we're trudging through. And everybody thought that 2021 was going to be way different than 2020, and we were going to wake up and it was all going to be perfect. But we're still going through the same stuff. We're still dealing with the same issues in terms of COVID and shutdowns and all of that stuff. How do we build momentum coming out into the new year?
I always think again, and this goes back to when we opened and we started talking about like the idea of motivation. Momentum can only take place with action. So you have to just define an action plan. And if you're like, I need to ease into it, okay, fine. If I haven't worked out in 2 weeks because I was traveling or I was sick or something like that, I'm probably not going to hit the gym and do my heaviest leg day one, and then go walk 3 miles. But I might do a modified leg day where instead of 4 sets of every exercise, I do three, right? And then I walk maybe a mile and a half, right? I'm getting back into it. So define your action plan, your goal. What's it going to take to hit that goal? And then just commit to the actions. And once you start doing that, like I said earlier, action creates emotion. And that's what I think people really are referring to, and they refer to momentum. It's like once you start taking action, you start getting things in your pipeline, you start adding referrals, you've got movement, you're out there, you're catching people outside, you're closing more deals. So it really just comes down to like momentum is a byproduct of just consistent action. It's like I remember this example from in my Cutco days. My manager was like, when you start from scratch, it's like you have this giant boulder and it weighs so much. And to get it moving even a little bit feels like it takes every ounce of your energy, and you have to kick and scream and claw to get it to even just move a little bit, right? You're like, ah! Like every single thing it takes to get it to move. But then once you get over that initial hump and it starts to really roll, now it's going. And all you have to do is give it a little push, give it a little push, give it a little push. So you can either take the ease my way into it, or you can do the approach that I usually do, which I just said I don't do this, but I actually do. Anytime I've taken a break from something, I kick my ass to get started again. And I actually do choose the hardest day for my workout, like leg day. And I'm like, I'm going to do deadlifts and squats and hip thrusts and lunges, and it's going to suck ass, and I'm going to need a wheelchair for the next 2 days. But I'm going to start with that, because the more work I put in the beginning here, the faster I get that ball rolling, and the quicker I get to that kind of just push the boulder movement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you wouldn't be able to sit down on the toilet seat for a while, but it's the only way to fly. It really is. So we talked about COVID, right? I briefly touched on that.
Yeah.
Has that changed your sales system? Has that changed the game at all for you? Or are you seeing better results because of your system?
love about our industry. Like when I go to these conferences and I meet these people, it's people who just like, they have a big vision. They're not going to let anything get in their way. They create their own reality. They create their own income, right? And they're just going to find a way. They're going to roll with the punches. And so I think that the benefit of what happened last year with there being a lot of like shutdowns and stuff like that was one of the only objections that I ever get from contractors when they're looking to invest in a system like mine is I just don't have the time, which I always think is such a bullshit objection because here's the thing. If you come to me and you're saying, I want to get better results, we've kind of hit this plateau or we're lacking in this area, we already know you're not where you want to be. And what does Albert Einstein define as insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting different results. So if you're not where you want to be, you have to do something different. And yeah, that might take a couple weeks or even a couple months of an adjustment to we're going to do it this way now, or we're going to use this software, or we're going to teach our guys this. But if you are willing to invest that time, that's where you have that big growth spurt afterward because you finally have the thing in place to grow, to get better results, right? So I think that what last year provided was a little bit of like time where people don't really know what to do. So they did sit on their computers and actually learn and actually got their teams organized to roll out different platforms and stuff like that. And I think it was a really positive thing in that regard. I also think that something like, and I'm going to plug this here, but my buddy Ryan Shantz, he's up in Canada, but he's the creator of Sumo Quote. Have you ever heard of it?
I have. Yeah.
Okay, so Sumo Quote is like the coolest. It's like the most user friendly. It's kind of like a light CRM, but really what it is like a digital plug and play quote builder. So like it's so personalized to each customer, and you can literally do like an online sales presentation with them there. All the numbers are there explained. I love it. Again, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail because that's not what this webinar is about. But if you want to look it up, look up my Sumo Quote webinar on the Roof Sales Mastery YouTube channel. But tools like that are going to allow people to do no contact, digital closing, things like that. Whereas, that can overcome the objection of like, you can't get into the house or somebody's paranoid or something like that.
It's funny when people say they don't have time, but they're not performing. So they're just going to continue wasting time doing the wrong thing.
Exactly. That's my point. I'm always very frustrated by when people say that because I'm like, you have no choice. Like, if you're not getting the results that you want, you have to do something different. And it's gonna take a little bit of time. Like, you just have to, you know. And again, it's great having the history, like when it comes to my personal situation, it's great having the history of so many contractors since 2014 that are like, I've tripled my revenue, I've doubled my bottom line, I've quadrupled my sales team using the system. Because then it's like, look, this is real, all you have to do is just do it. It's kind of like the gym membership. You can buy the gym membership, but I can't lift the weights for you. But if you want the results, you're just going to have to get your ass up and do it. It's the same thing with learning a new platform.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to take time and change. Growth is painful, right? Like you said, you hit the gym as hard as you can. You're in pain, but you're on your way to getting better, stronger, faster, and not being in pain every time you do certain movements. It's the same thing when adapting to a new system or bringing on a new CRM or whatever it may be. There's growth pains that are accompanied with those changes, but eventually you just get used to it. Your body gets used to it. Everything is just, muscle memory at that point.
And I think you have to just embrace discomfort. I think anybody who's a top performer in anything, they just embrace it. It's like I always say, do shit that sucks. Like with some of my workouts, I call it do shit that sucks instead of like chest day or leg day or shoulders and back day or whatever. I'm just like do shit that sucks day, and you just appreciate the grit that you have to do that. And that just might not be something physical that you're overcoming, but it might be, all right, we're going to learn this new thing, but I'm going to love that it's challenging to do because on the other side, I'm going to have these results that I've always wanted.
Absolutely. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I highly recommend any of the listeners right now go on to roofsalesmastery.com, go on to Becca Switzer, go on to her Instagram. You talk about a lot of testimonials. I mean, I'm going through just clicking on post after post of people saying, I made this much money and I made this much money. And it's phenomenal. So, do you have any events coming up that you're going to be speaking at where people can catch you? I know one that I'm very excited about, but I'm going to let you plug it.
I do. So the next one that I've got on the docket here, I'm going to be speaking for RoofCon's Roof Cruise. Holla! It's going to be great. It's going to be in the Bahamas. So that's May 3rd through the 7th. You can actually find details at roofcruise.com, but you do have to get tickets before February 28th. I know that's when they're stopping selling them. But Royal Caribbean's Navigator of the Seas, I think we're porting in Miami, and then we go to like Coco Key and all I know is there's chains in the Bahamas. I can't remember the specific islands, but it's going to be great. Come drink mojitos. Let's get sunburned together. Let's sing to dolphins. And we're going to learn all about roofing and how to scale your business and some recruiting and management techniques, things like that. And it's a great tax deduction. I mean, it's a
Right.
total write-off. So come.
It's an easy way to have fun and save money. You recommend that for business owners, salesmen? Who would you recommend going to that?
I think primarily RoofCon's thing is mostly about like directed toward management and ownership. But that being said, when I went to RoofCon, a lot of people brought their sales guys. It's just great to get people like involved and excited and have more vision and see that, oh, there's all these other badasses out here. It inspires people. Like, I want to be where that person is someday. So it's great for everybody. I think that the content is probably more primarily going to be focused toward business ownership, but that doesn't mean roof salesmen shouldn't go. There's going to be a ton of salesmen there.
Awesome. So let's plug Diamonds in the Sky really quickly. Where can we get that?
So just go to roofsalesmastery.com. And if you scroll down, I've got all my 6 programs there. My ebook is there. So the ebook is Diamonds in the Sky. It's a super easy read. You could probably read it in 60 or 90 minutes. It's like 65 pages. It's a great like 30,000 foot view of storm restoration. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't dipped your toe into any of my content, that's a great way to start because it gives you a little taste of kind of a lot of it, like supplementing a little bit, closing, door knocking, my story and stuff like that. So roofsalesmaster.com, that's where you can check out everything. I've got 6 programs for recruiting, sales training, supplementing, and Xactimate, and my ebook is there.
Awesome. Fantastic. So do you have a funny story to tell us when you first started in the industry, or maybe something that you've come across that stands out to you that you think the listeners might need?
A funny story. Well, I don't know that this is a funny story per se, but here's what I will say that's funny now to a struggling newcomer to the industry. Everybody probably looks at me at this point and is like, she's just such a good salesperson. It was probably easy for her and she's a girl, blah, blah. Even though I came from a Cutco background and I had like really good sales training, I had 0 sales training for door to door. I had never done that in my life. I didn't know shit about roofs. I didn't know anything about hail. I didn't know anything about insurance, right? Like nothing. They literally put me out there in the wilderness and they're like, you'll figure it out. And I did ride around for like one day with this kid named Chris, and he knocked doors and he was only like, okay. He'd been doing it for like 6 months. So I went out there and I was like, I'm just going to go try it on my own. And the company at the time, this was like a storm set that we were working. It was Steve Kemper Builders. And I went out there and I don't know what was happening to me. I was just shitting the bed. Like I would knock on the door and somebody would come to the door and I was just like, I don't know what it's like to be stung by a bee and be like really allergic to bees, but I can only imagine this is what it's like. My throat would just like close in on itself and my mouth was so dry. And I remember like the first time I stumbled, this person probably thought I was like on crack. And I was like stumbling over my words and I was like, I'm with the Scott Kemper Builders. I like said the wrong company name and I had my business cards there. And I was like, I just sound totally retarded. It's bad. And then not to mention, I was also driving a bright yellow Dodge Neon around. So this is like, and it had like a carbon fiber. It was like a Cholo mobile. Like it had rims and like a body kit. This is like what I drove when I was in high school. And I still had this car because I was only 21, I think. I was still 21 when I went out to sell roofs for the first time. So I was just a mess. All right. So if you're a brand new person, you're out there, I was a mess. You're going to be a mess too, probably. Just keep hanging there, practice, get your hands on some actual training, and I promise you'll do better than probably I did in the very beginning. So you'll
awesome.
Get there, folks.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Everybody, Becca Switzer, roofsalesmastery.com, Diamonds in the Sky, Roof Cruise. Tons of content you can find on her. Don't forget about our sponsors, guys, Dataforma at dataforma.com and RoofSource at roofsource.com. I'm Arthur Perez. That's Becca Switzer. We are the Ask My Roofer podcast. And as always, stay safe on those roofs, guys.
Bye.